the most current topic is the doping, right? People are like, oh man, he's taking steroids. Yes, I am taking steroids. I am 40 years old. I'm about to be 41. I am on TRT for the last 5 years of my life.
Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Main Idea Podcast, where today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Vagner Rocha. A quick reminder for those of you that love this podcast, and those of you that have listened to more than 2 episodes, please take 30 seconds and leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify and subscribe to the YouTube channel. This helps the show get discovered organically and helps me continue to bring on amazing guests. Also, there are now timestamps in the show notes, so feel free to jump around to the part that interests you most, although I always recommend listening to the episode in its entirety. Vagner Rocha is a jiu-jitsu black belt, former UFC, Strikeforce, and Titan FC mixed martial arts athlete who won bronze in the 88 kilo division at the 2022 ADCC World Championships. Recently, Vagner has come under criticism for his IBJJF suspension, as well as a few other incidents in his past. We discuss each of these at length, and I appreciate Vagner's transparency on these issues and willingness to discuss the vilification that he receives online. When faced with opinions and ambiguity, I believe it's important to address things head-on with the people involved, to not hide behind the comfort of a keyboard, but instead hear people's stories, their experience, and the mindset they maintain on and off the mats as they go through these tribulations. Thank you to those who contributed useful questions and themes on the Reddit thread. I'm pretty sure I'm going to continue to do this as it was very helpful. So with each lead into the episodes, I'll be posing questions there or inviting listeners to participate. I hope that you enjoy this episode as much as I did. Without further ado, Vagner Rocha. Well, Vagner, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. As I stated before, I've been really excited to sit down and talk to you about all things jiu-jitsu, as well as just kind of like some personal endeavors and your approach to this beautiful art form. But I want to first say thank you for taking the time to be on the show.
Thank you for the invitation, and I'm happy. I'm happy to be here. Happy to have this moment to talk things, jiu-jitsu things.
Yeah. Well, we'll start with I guess like a kind of a broad philosophical question that I've thrown at a couple different people in a couple different grappling arts. And I just like to hear each person's kind of individual definition, but what does jiu-jitsu mean to you, having dedicated, your life to it in some respects?
Man, that's such a hard one. But I think the overall for me is, it was a change of life, you know. It brought a dream come true. It brought a new lifestyle for me. It brought a place for me to have a place to I'd be judged, to just release and kind of, have kind of like feel like everybody who does jiu-jitsu at one time or another, they're in the gym and their stress of life doesn't exist anymore,
Yeah.
So for me, it was just this change of life, just made me feel like everything that was going wrong in my life outside of jiu-jitsu, it didn't matter when I was on the mat, because all it mattered was for me to survive that 5-minute round. You know what I mean? Like that's what I feel like jiu-jitsu is. Still to this day, it's still a change of life. I feel like now, instead of changing my life, I feel like I'm changing other people's lives. I'm helping other people with their dreams and helping other people grow and helping other people become a better version of themselves.
So if we kind of linger here for a second, what was it about, you're talking about this, like the release that jiu-jitsu provided, this escape from things that are going on outside. What was life outside of the academy like, or off the mats for you when you were first getting involved in this?
It was hard. I started jiu-jitsu right at the age of 20 years old. And I had just, probably around that same time, I had just found out I was going to be a father of my daughter, Vagner Rocha. Some of you may know her. She competes. She's number one. And at 20 years old, had just gotten a regular job in the world, and I realized how hard I had just made my life upon myself. One, by becoming a father,
Yeah.
because I actually had a real dad at home, and the first thing he said to me when he found out I was going to become a dad was, "Don't disappoint me with becoming a father, because some people are fathers, but they're not really fathers. Some people make kids, but they're not really present in their kids' lives. I mean, they're not real fathers. They're fathers. They're semen donors. Let's just say, right."
Right.
And he was clear. He was very clear with me. Like he said, you need to make sure you're the best version of you for your child. And I feel like that was like the beginning of the heavy stress over my life. I was financially strapped. I worked a construction job with my dad, and I honestly didn't know anything of construction. I was just there because my dad did it, and he's like, "You want to work? This is what you got to do if you're not going to go to college." And I was like, "I don't want to go to college. I don't want to go to school anymore."
Yeah.
So that was that was what I kind of took to. And jiu-jitsu was like that. Like at the end of the day, I get to like get an hour away from home, and I get to get away from, I worked with my dad. I shared, living with my parents for a while, early on. And I just wanted to get out of the house and kind of like, get an hour and a half to myself. And jiu-jitsu was it, that was the only thing I had, and that to me, every time I did it, I remember just feeling so good, even though I knew right when I got home, there was a bunch of stuff to pile up on me again, but I knew like that hour and a half was cool. It was like, man, I tried, I worked hard. I got beat up most of the time in the beginning, but I was there, so.
I was just talking to Lance Palmer about this yesterday, the PFL fighter, and about how much of a escape I think, and this what's beautiful about it is it applies to non-professionals as well. Like you can be a hobbyist and have all these life stressors going on, but there's something very unique about going in, and that time you get on the mat, whether it's an hour, whether it's an hour and a half, that you have to be present for it, because if you're not, you're just getting pile drived by your opponents. Like if you don't show up and check your shit at the door and stop worrying about your deadlines and stop worrying about phone calls and all the stuff that makes life so hectic, you just get steamrolled. So it requires that you show up and you be there for your training partners. You're trying to make each other better. And like, I've played sports my whole life. I haven't found anything that's quite like what jiu-jitsu provides in that regard.
Yeah, you'll get rolled. You'll get steamrolled. You got to literally disconnect from whatever's happening in the world and kind of plug into what's about to happen to you. And if you don't prepare your mind for it, you're going to have a bad day. And I feel like that's also one of the reasons why a lot of people do quit. Because they realize after 6 months of classes that they haven't gotten that much better. They've gotten better. They're better than the version that they came in through the door as, but they're not like significantly better than they thought they would be, right? Their minds are saying, "Oh, I'm going to be like beating up all these guys in a couple months." You know what I mean? And they realize like, "Oh man, this is not happening in 6 months. It's not happening in a year. It's not going to happen in 2 years." You know what I mean? It's going to happen eventually, but it's not going to happen that fast. So I feel like that's it's so hard. There's nothing like jiu-jitsu in the world.
Was there with your experience between like, your mixed martial arts career, your understanding of wrestling, and the adoption of wrestling is something that you really utilize within jiu-jitsu, and then jiu-jitsu itself as a standalone. What was it about? Like, what about jiu-jitsu do you think is so addicting for the long term? You see people, they phase into and out of wrestling, phase into and out of striking in terms of like age and life. Jiu-jitsu, you can be on the mats with someone in their 70s, with someone in their 60s. Like there's just this, what is it about the art form of jiu-jitsu that you think like kind of nurtures that type of environment where you can see longevity in that regard?
I think the practicality of it, I think you can see an older gentleman who knows enough, and he can grab a younger person and have his way with him. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like wrestling at its core is a lot of athleticism. There's a lot of athleticism. Listen, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of technique,
Right.
but you can take a guy who's in his 40s, and like me, and I could go into a tournament and compete with a much younger guy. But if I were a Division I All-American in my 40s and I pulled up to a college meet today, I probably wouldn't hang. You know what I mean? You don't see it. It doesn't exist. Because it's very hard. Like look at wrestling in itself in the format. Like Jordan Burroughs is so famous, and not because of how good he is, but the fact that he's been in it for so long, and he's but there isn't many like him. It isn't easy to do, and he's also very, very physical. He's a jock.
Yeah.
Where in jiu-jitsu, you don't have to be a jock. You can actually be the most, you see some weird bodies in jiu-jitsu. You get some stubby, fat guy with short legs who has a good guard or has good top pressure. You see all sorts of weird humans, and everybody can do it. Like I said, you could be an older gentleman and beat up the young guys. And it's jiu-jitsu is just practical to everybody, and it's so easy to do it for a long time because you can find your niche in it and kind of just cruise with it,
Yeah, we have a guy in his 70s at our academy, and it's really inspiring to train with him. Like it's really cool how many guys in their 70s you see do much at all, right? Like
right.
Being around, obviously there's variance, right? You know that when you train with him, you're not going to go 10 out of 10. But the fact that he is there, the fact that he's not just sitting at home, that he's not just accepting getting older, but he's showing up and he has knowledge and he has wisdom, right? He's been doing this for a long time. So he'll display some sort of knowledge on you that as the athletic young 34-year-old who's got more time and availability, you see things in a way that you won't, but he does, and that's really cool. And I growing up competing in sports my whole life, just don't see that. It's not something that you get to experience as a young athlete.
Yeah, I feel like when we're younger, we don't appreciate the wisdom that comes with age.
No
When we're
way.
young, we think, I don't want to be old. I don't want to be old. You just think, I don't want to be old, but you don't actually think, like, how much knowledge you gain as you get older. And a guy in his 70s, I can only imagine what he's lived and what he's seen, and the things he's learned throughout his life. You know what I mean? And that wisdom is amazing. And if you can get 5 minutes with a human being like that, and you can roll with them, and you can ask questions, and you can sometimes it might not even be jiu-jitsu. The wisdom might just spill out for something else that you need. So
what do you use, like, as someone who's still competing, right? Like, you still competed last year. What do you use to negate age?
What I've been doing to help me slow down the aging process is working out as much as I can. And I honestly dislike working out. I don't really appreciate it as much as I should.
Yeah.
But I feel like the fact that I have been doing it for the last 3 or 4 years consistently, it has tremendously helped my body stay intact and keep me injury free. I feel like that's and I don't mean like grabbing a bunch of weights and trying to like squat really heavy or deadlift really heavy. No, I'm talking lightweight, a lot of reps, just like, like a match, and to me, that's been the savior of my body, which, because, in jiu-jitsu, this is something none of us can avoid, is getting injured. We are going to get injured. It's, you stub your toe and you get injured. You plant your hand, you twist your wrist, you put your arm down, your elbow feels weird. You know what I mean? Your shoulders, your neck, something's always going to be wrong
24/7.
It's just, if you're training enough and consistent enough, you're going to be injured. So the secret that I've learned is work out, and when I do injure something, protect it as best I can, and baby it and protect it and baby it, and then, heal it, and then keep it moving so that you don't make another injury of something else because of it.
Right. It's definitely seemed like over the last, if you look at the past, maybe even just decade of jiu-jitsu, you're starting to see the athleticism, like I call it the athleticizing of sports, but you start to see more of a separation from like a tough guy brawler into the development of the like extracurriculars outside of competition. So you're actually seeing athletes engage in like structured strength and conditioning specific for jiu-jitsu. And you've been able to compete kind of through that entire spectrum of time. And I wonder, like, at what point through your career did you start to notice that there was this benefit to training outside of training? Like, there's this benefit to be had from strength and conditioning to apply to the sport versus just getting more reps, more time, more rolls, more days on the mat.
For me, it was, I know exactly what year it was. It was 2017. Beginning of 2017, like the first months of the year, I had an MMA fight. And before that, it was my last MMA fight, actually. My last MMA fight. My wife is a strength and conditioning coach at her gym, and she does like women's boot camp classes, basically. So she's not like, teaching grown men and doing, like she's not that in depth of working out. But she was like, you need to work out. You're focused big time on jiu-jitsu, but you need to start working out just a little bit. And I'm like, I don't want to work out. I'm not going to work out. I don't want to work out.
It's like nobody in
I'm like,
jiu-jitsu wants
I
to
thought,
train.
I'm like, I thought to myself, like, how is this going to help my jiu-jitsu? Lifting weights, like this is not, I had that like Mr. Miyagi effect, like just go do jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? Like you're gonna get better by doing jiu-jitsu, not by lifting weights. So she's like, just try it out for a couple months. I said, okay, and I did, and I saw it. I was like, oh man, I'm faster, I'm stronger, I feel better. I just saw the immediate effects of it within a month, of working out. And like I said, it wasn't even, and I thought I was working out at the time. It wasn't even working out like I would work out now, but it was enough that I was like, all right, I can see it, and I saw it even change in my body, that I didn't have before. And that to me kind of convinced me and sealed the deal.
Because you have a very physical style of jiu-jitsu, and I've read some accounts that call it like a bully style. I've listened to talks where you discuss kind of the emotional approach to it, where you try to draw out, and not try, I mean, you very successfully draw out reactions from a lot of your opponents, while, as Danaher said, you maintain this completely relaxed emotion on yourself. Like despite being able to bring it out of them, it's very, very challenging for them to actually get that out of you in a match, and you're physical about it. How much of that is like a learned skill? How much of that is who you are? Did you realize a point through your career where you're like, you know what? I can just frustrate the hell out of these guys. They start to play to my game. They start reacting to me, and I can utilize this? Or was that just kind of how you were from the first day that you got on the mats?
I like to say I learned this over time. I don't think I was like this from day one. One, because when you do jiu-jitsu, there's that factor in the gym that these people are still your friends and they're your teammates, and you want to continue to have friends and have, at the end of the day, we are an individual when we compete, but we are a team when we train. So for me to do it in training, every time I do this to somebody in training, I could see them kind of already like it doesn't sit well with them.
Right.
And I do it every once in a while, especially in my competition rounds with people I trust and people who know me. But I only found out through training with somebody who I would have trouble with. And then one day I realized, like, when I set this almost like a Nate Diaz effect where I'm just kind of like in your face the whole time. Like I'm not backing up. I'm not gonna accept you beating me. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna move forward the whole time. Even if I am losing, I'm gonna move forward the whole time. And I'm gonna stay in their face, and I'm gonna press you, and I'm gonna push you around, and I'm gonna just kind of like almost like I said, Nate Diaz, like in the paint, you know what I mean? Boxing inside the paint. Like I had that's the style I try to use. And I realized, like, this used to make the fight so much harder for everybody I trained. One, because I have good cardio and I was able to do it for, 10, 20 minutes straight. And some guys would fall apart at the 7-minute mark, like today I had a training partner that I was training with, and I'm like, I hadn't trained with him in a while, and he's really good. And I'm like, if I train with him normal, I'm going to have a hard roll, and he may win the round and I may win the round. But if I set the pace, the competition pace that I do, there's no way he can keep up, and there's no way most people can keep up with it. And I did. And at like 7 minutes, he was looking at the clock, and then I tapped him for the first time after 7 minutes. And then, multiple taps came after that. And then I could hear him sounding like he wanted to puke. And I was like, "You gonna puke?" He's like, "I don't know." Just don't puke on me. And he was like, "Give me a minute." And I gave him a minute, and then he came back, and then we had another minute, and we were doing longer rounds. And he's like, "Man, it's so terrible when you turn up the fire." And like I said, I don't feel like I turn up the fire. I think it's just I don't give you any space to move. And I'm just like, we're going to be engaged, even if it's just like hand fighting or pummeling, or, I'm trying to, press on your legs, but I'm not like making distance for my opponents to have a reaction or to think. I want you consistently thinking like, just stop moving. Like, just get off me, get away from me. Don't touch me. You know what I mean? Like, and that's, to me, like I said, that's just I always think of Nate Diaz, because he when he had these amazing fights, he would do that to people, right? He would like maybe lose a round and then come back and just be in the guy's face the whole time, talking to him and just punching him, and, and just, being a bully,
Yep.
And I don't think, it's hard to say, how do you call somebody a bully when we're training a martial art that involves somebody trying to break your arm or your foot or choke you? Like,
right.
What does this even mean, this word? You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's definitely not there's not a required pre-existing camaraderie that's necessary to make a round good. Like, as a fan, I always find these critiques interesting, because that's what I want to watch. I want to watch somebody not step back to press forward, whether it's watching a mixed martial arts fight, whether it's watching a grappling event, a gi event. What you don't want is to watch someone back away. That's not exciting. You want two people that are aggressively approaching each other, not giving space, being relentless, not being afraid of their cardiovascular engine being utilized. And I think sometimes that's the case, is that the conditioning isn't there, so someone's hesitant to use it. But when you see a guy like, you watch your match with Isaac in 2022, the second the clock started, the foot's buried on the gas pedal for the entire round, right? You guys are just going hard. And it's match of the event.
Yeah.
So like,
I really needed that match. I really needed that match. Because
what do you mean?
People, there's so much, I have so much hate online that, people hate. I don't know why people just hate me. Like, I don't know if it's the person I am, or they think that the person that I compete as, or the persona that I am in competition, is who I am in real life. Like, winning a match of the tournament, of the biggest tournament to ever be hosted, it helps. You know what I mean? Like, all right, I'm still appreciated somewhere. And the crowd was just so insane. So they were thriving on it, and they were just like, they were fiending. They felt that, like, they were there with me, and they were there with Isaac. So like I said, I just needed that moment. That made me feel like, you know what, all these years I've been working hard for this. There's a reason for all these years.
Even as a fan watching it on a computer screen, on a stream, it was palpable. Like, you could feel that this arena was getting it right, that the ADCC was on display, and it really felt like an energetic event for the first time as someone who watches it. Like, it had UFC elements where you really felt like you were watching something important. You know what I mean? And I can only imagine being there, like the sound of the crowd and that many people packed into the building for an ADCC event. Go ahead.
I wasn't even sure they were cheering for me at one moment or another, because, like you said, I was foot on the gas pedal from the get-go of the fight. Like, I didn't give Isaac a second to back up or and he didn't give me a second to back up either. Every time we were engaged, we were doing something. You know what I mean? There was some sort of movement. There was some sort of scramble. There was some sort of takedown. There was never there was never a stop in the moment. So I didn't get a chance to kind of like, I usually sometimes in matches, I'll pop around, I'll look around, and I'll look up, and I'll look into the crowd.
Good
I
luck.
can feel the crowd. I don't remember anything in that match. And the ADCC before that, 2019, I had a really good match with a guy named Celsius Vinicius. But at the same time I was fighting on mat 1, I was fighting on mat 3, and mat 1 was Gary Tone and Renato Canuto. And these guys were going insane too. And it was the match of the tournament then too on this one. And the crowd was going nuts. So when I was fighting Isaac, I could hear the crowd going nuts. I just didn't know they were cheering for me and him because I was like, whatever, I'm in a match. This is what I do. This is just us going. And then afterwards, I could see, like the crowd, when I got off the mat, I could tell the crowd was like, they were in it. And they were like, I was like, oh, they were cheering for us.
It's got to be such a good feeling, man.
It was insane.
You know, let's try to figure this out. Let's try to figure out this villain persona that seems to be present in communities online towards you. And I guess one place we could start is, when in your career did you start to feel like that was the chatter in, like, outside of the academy where you're at, outside of the people that really know you, outside of your family?
I know exactly when this started, and it's kind of my fault, and but it isn't. It is and it isn't. It's hard to say. But I feel like in 2015, I think it was. I'm trying to remember the year. No, was it 15? I don't remember the year now. I can't remember the year. But I fought AJ Agazarm, who's
I don't remember the year too, but I know what you're going to say. Yeah,
he's another little a little person online that just nobody likes, right? Yeah. And I understand why nobody likes him, because I don't like him. But he was just running his mouth about how he was going to do all sorts of things to me, and so I went to fight him. And when I got on stage, I kicked him off the stage.
Was this at Polaris?
No, it was Fight to Win. It was
Gotcha.
on Seth's event. Seth was, not to blame Seth, but Seth didn't help by telling me and him that whatever happened on stage, he didn't care. He just wanted it to be a show. He goes, "You guys get in a fist fight for all I care." Like,
sell the fight, just go.
Yeah. He goes, get in a fist fight for all you care, and just make it a show. And little did he know, he told the wrong guy this. And I was like, all right, like, if he's really saying, like, he wants me to do this, then that he's just opened the floodgates. And I was immature, and today I know what I did was wrong. At the time, it felt right, and just like everything you do in your life that feels wrong but is right sometimes, at that moment I knew it was wrong, and I did it anyways. And I kicked him off the stage. He didn't get hurt, but the internet went wild, and I think everybody who was in jiu-jitsu at that time placed me as a villain for doing that. Like, I immediately became this bad guy that I truly am not, but I became that guy for it. And then everything after that, and then people started watching me compete, and they were like, man, not only does this guy kick people off stages, but he's like ruthlessly mean when he fights. And that's it. Just that persona became something that I honestly, I've never really embraced it. But if you go, and you say something in my regard online, it's the immediate first thing I get,
Yeah, there was I like I said before, I posed some questions just to Reddit to see, like, hey, I'm having Vagner on. Does anyone have any questions? And I kind of thought that this would be a cool opportunity for jiu-jitsu community members to ask a legend things about the sport, right? About mindset or technique or stuff. And the majority of the questions were about your relationship with Marcel, kicking AJ Agazarm off the stage, doping, and very few were actually constructive, to the point where I kind of had to get involved, and I had to enter myself back into the threads to be like, hey, I'm actually trying to get some constructive questions here. And I wonder, like, as a person who's putting blood, sweat, and tears into what you do every day, you're busting your ass for not only yourself, your family, but to be a competitor at a world-class level in a sport that gives very little in return. I mean, you can grind for 25 years, and this isn't baseball. It's not the NBA. It's not even UFC, right? If you win, what do you get if you win ADCC? Like $5,000 in prize money. I mean, not endorsements, stuff like that. It's chump change.
$10,000.
Yeah. So like, you can pay off part of your car with that, but you're not like, you're not, it's not changing your life, but you're investing so much of your life into it. So I think the AJ thing is the starting point, but then it puts you on a track where anything you do that's not apologizing and getting back on track, it's just more fuel for the fire, right? And on these online communities, behind the safety of a keyboard and anonymity is a breeding ground for people to just form opinions, right? Not based on, not sitting down with someone for an hour and a half and going, hey, let's chat about this. Instead, it's just, I read this article, I heard this blurb, I think this about that. Or how do we correct things like this in sport? Do you feel, how much of this is on you, the athlete, to address these kind of things, and how much of it is on the community to think differently about how we approach stuff?
With social media, this gives anybody and everybody the ability to share and voice their opinion. And sometimes most people voice their opinions and their thoughts without actual knowing the true facts behind everything, So it's it's hard. It's hard to really say, oh, I want to change these people's thoughts about how they feel about me. Truthfully, I kind of care. It's not the nice things that they say online. It's not like I'm like reading nice comments. I'm reading comments that are mean. But at the same time, the people who really know me, that spend time with me in my gym, like the kids I teach, the adults I teach, they know who I am. They feel me, they see me, they have experiences with me. People through the community of jiu-jitsu who've actually had conversations with me, they know who I am. They know the person I am. It's just sad, It's sad that people get to, say things that sometimes they're saying things that are not true, and that becomes kind of like gossip, right? Like if you say one thing here, somebody reads it, now they think that's a fact, and then they share that forward because they read it somewhere, and they read it on Twitter or on Instagram or on Reddit, let's say, and that becomes their fact. That becomes their fact. That's not the real fact, but becomes their fact. This is what I think of this guy now, So because I have so much looming topics, right? Like this AJ, this doping thing that came out, and then the other thing that happened with Marcel. Like it's just, these subjects are like, the only thing I can take complete fault for is actually kicking AJ off stage, because I actually did that.
Right.
That I'm like, I take 100% fault for. I shouldn't have done that. But again, when I felt insulted, and I felt like I should insult him back, or maybe bring him to a point where he would react. But in reality, I should have just ignored him. And in reality, I kicked him off stage, and we fought for 10 minutes, and I beat him in jiu-jitsu for 10 minutes after that, like decisively. And I should have just done that to him, because that would have been more insulting and let him eat his own words, right? But it's when you're young, you're dumb. When you're young, you're dumb, and you make dumb decisions.
It's funny that it takes like a dance partner. I mean, of all the characters in grappling, it makes sense that someone like AJ would pull that out of you. Like he's a boisterous, loud, arrogant competitor who talks a lot of trash too. It's not like you kicked Gandhi off the stage.
You know why I felt insulted by him? Because I had fought him. He's from Florida, and I was raised in Florida most of my life. I started jiu-jitsu in Florida. I had fought him from blue belt all the way up to black belt, and I had beaten him 8 times. He beat me 1 time when we were blue belts, 1 time. And he had the audacity to say that he was going to choke me and put me to sleep, and all these things that I'm like, bro, what are you talking about? And online at the time, you know, I felt insulted by his comments. And then now, like I said, young and dumb, you make mistakes. You know, the most current topic is the doping, right?
Yeah.
People are like, oh man, he's taking steroids. Yes, I am taking steroids. I am 40 years old. I'm about to be 41. I am on TRT for the last 5 years of my life. I actually posted about it a couple months ago, like 3 months ago. Like, I have no shame in this. And when I did the Worlds tournament, they were like, hey, the finalists will have whoever wins first place will have to test.
IBJJF.
IBJJF. Right. I'm like, yeah. I'm not testing. I'm like, I'm on testosterone. Like, I take testosterone. I'm gonna clearly fail the test, right? I'm not taking the test. So what I did is I didn't show up to pick up the medal because I felt, you know, it's not fair for me to go on that podium, grab the first place medal, even though I know I had already won, right? I already won. I'm not gonna grab the first place medal and go home and say, hey, I won the world championships, even though I knew the rules said I couldn't do that. But people are like, oh, you should have known before you went. And I didn't know. That's the truth. I didn't know. I went to the tournament. I didn't even fill out the waiver. I asked my daughter to sign me, her brother, and her up. I said, sign us all up for the tournament. We're going to go to California and compete. Pay the registration fee. She filled out the forms. I didn't even know. I showed up to the tournament. I'm competing. 3 matches in. I'm 4 matches into the finals now. They're like, oh, you're going to have to test if you win. And I'm like, okay. I already knew I was going to win because the other finalist was a teammate of mine who said he wasn't going to compete against me because he already knew that no matter even if we competed, I was going to win. He's like, hey, no, we're teammates. You can take first place. I said, fine, no problem. Thank you.
Right.
And then they came at me with this, and I said, oh, so if that's the case, I don't want the medal. I could have gotten the medal. I could have went up there, got the medal, said no to the test anyways, and still had this whole ordeal happen. I said no. I walked away. And then they had the audacity to come to my house and say, hey, we're going to test you. You went to this competition. I said, no, I'm not testing. I already told you guys there that I'm not testing. If this is not clear to you, that I'm telling you right now that I take steroids. Yeah. I'm on testosterone replacement. I know this is against the USADA rules because I work with UFC athletes. I know what the rules are. For you to test me for a sport that is amateur to me, because it's an amateur sport, right? I'm paying to compete. I pay to show up. I pay for my hotel. I pay for my training. Like, there was none part of it that this I'm making any money out of this. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. You know, and that is a topic right now that's really hot, and people are upset about it. And they're like, oh, he's a cheater. Cheater of what? Like, they only test first place. What about all the other places? What about everybody that shows up to this event? How about we talk about it like this? How about we test everybody, and then we'll see what's left from there, you know? And that will change the sport. If you're looking to change the sport, why test one person? That doesn't make any sense, you know?
So what do you think the sport needs? Because as I'll say my piece here, which is growing up and idolizing athletes my whole life. One thing that stuck out to me that was devastating was when Lance Armstrong finally got caught for doping, right? And for me,
finally got caught. You mean, right? Like, cause
yeah, that's what, right? Like, he's
you
doing
know how many other
right,
cyclists?
That's my point. He's doing it. Everyone's doing it. But as a young athlete, right, as me, someone looking up to the greatest blank in the world, right, that happened to be the greatest cyclist, but there were other people in my field that I was competing in that I looked up to. It was devastating as a young athlete to see, not that he was doing that, but and this is, I'm talking about his case, not you at all. I'm just talking about him. It was that he had lied about it for so long, and then how intricate it actually was. Now, jiu-jitsu athletes in their 40 competing in a an insanely dominant and demanding sport that are taking testosterone or hormone replacement therapy feels different to me than what happened with like Lance Armstrong. But it painted this picture of the doping athlete, right? Then you had this happen in baseball and steroid use. And to be fair, and I think that this is where it almost starts to create a reshaping of this image, is transparency. Like you just saying that and hearing it is like, that's kind of all you want as a fan, is to be able to better make expectations for yourself in the sport and understand how things are working based on what the best people in the world are doing. And as someone who's done strength and conditioning my entire life, it's no fucking surprise to me. It makes total sense. You guys are putting yourselves through the most rigorous and demanding sport constantly for, again, basically no return. How is your body supposed to recover? And my question is it even possible to have your output without the assistance of performance? Like, that's actually an honest question. Is it possible to maintain that kind of output that jiu-jitsu demands on the top competitors without performance enhancing drugs?
I believe it can be done. I think there is athletes doing it. I don't think there's a lot of them, but I do think there is some of them. You know, I hear people who are online talking about they're not and this, that, the other. I don't know who is and who isn't. I can't tell you that. You can't tell that by looking at someone. But I guarantee you there is somebody out there that is clean, that is doing it. But do I think it makes for a better athlete? No, I don't. I think it doesn't. I think you should allow all these athletes who are at that level doing, I think in every sport, and I'm just saying in jiu-jitsu, I'm talking basketball, football, fighting. I think allow people to have a certain level of regulation to their body so that they can perform, so that they can recover, so that they can live longer, so that they can be healthier, so that they can recover from injuries faster. Like, dude, you are risking your body. You are playing with fire. You know what I mean? Like in jiu-jitsu, we're playing with fire. Like you see people breaking their necks. Like we are literally putting our hand above fire and removing it every time we're in a submission. You know, it's dangerous. You know, and like you talk about Lance Armstrong. Like, yeah, you know, maybe what he did was wrong, but look at what he knew he was doing was wrong. That's why there was so much secrecy behind it, right? And he was making a fortune for it. Do you really think he lost? You think he lost his fortune because of his decisions? Let's just say. I don't think he lost his fortune. I think he's still very wealthy. He's somewhere doing very well for himself. You know, I think he lost a lot of money because of it, right? Because he got caught. But he knew when he was doing it that it was wrong. He knew that it was against the rules, right? And he was in a sport where he had to follow the rules and he was getting paid to be in the rules. Now, that's a different story, you know? Like, if you look at, like, even the UFC, right? The athletes that are there, they're getting paid a pretty substantial amount of money. If they break the rule...
more than an IBJJF competitor.
Yeah, if they break the rule and they don't follow the procedures of the rules, it's fair for them to be, you know, maybe held out of sports for a year and lose a part of their purse. And yeah, I get it. You know, that's the rule of the sport. But I don't honestly think I think it's detrimental. I think every athlete should have, most athletes, and they should implement the rule that an athlete has a level that they need to maintain through certain doctors, you know, and they need to, you know, abide to that, you know, so that they can have a longer, healthier life in the sport that they play.
Well, it seems almost like, and correct me where I'm wrong here, but ADCC is very adamant about not adopting USADA protocols. So Mo has made statements saying that, hey, keep the USADA stuff in IBJJF. We're not going to do that. And in a way, that's kind of a recognition that we're aware that we're aware that some of our athletes are taking performance enhancing drugs, and we understand the demands of the sport. And we don't want to do anything about that. Do you think that that's the right approach? And is there any way to improve that, to further push the longevity of jiu-jitsu, keep top level people performing, and keep the level of competition? Because as like a fan, it's like a double-edged sword, because here's what you don't want as a fan that I don't think people are really talking about. You don't want a huge, strong, athletic as hell, performance enhancing drug athlete to compete against a clean, smaller, pretty strong, pretty athletic person. It's going to be a horrible match. No one will watch that. No one will watch it. Do you want to see base hits or do you want to see home runs? Honestly, as a fan, what is more exciting to watch? And
when was baseball most exciting?
Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, right? But honestly, right? Like, what's the best year in baseball? Like, I am not a baseball fan, but I can call both those names out instantaneously, and they both popped for doping, and they both set home run records. But that's the year that even non-fans remember about the sport. And I guess what I'm getting at is, what's the right messaging that IBJJF and ADCC needs to start putting forward to the fans to create the right expectations about this kind of stuff for hobbyists, for the people that are actually the fans, that are downloading the streaming, that are buying the instructionals, that are tuning in, that are listening to podcasts, like, because they look up to that, they consume the information. What's the right way to go about this?
I have no idea. I kind of agree with the fact that we should have an open discussion about it. Like, there should be, the biggest promoters should be involved in discussing what is the right approach. Mm-hmm. I think it should be open. It should be all. And it should be, maybe monitored by certain physicians. You know what I mean? And it should be regulated. If you're gonna do testing, then do it right. You know what I mean? Or don't do it at all. IBJJF to me is, they have one of the most amazing jiu-jitsu platforms on the planet. But to me, truthfully, they are just takers. That's how I see it. They're not giving back. They just take. And I feel like if you want to help jiu-jitsu grow, then do the right things for jiu-jitsu to grow. Just don't continue to take and give out these medals and pretend that if you become a world champion, it's going to change your life, because it won't. I know many world champions who are dead broke somewhere and they have nothing to their name. And it's going to continue to be like that for a long time, as long as instructors of gyms continue to think like, oh yeah, you have to become a world champion to do something with your life. And it's not true, because there's many guys out there who have made names and have done, made livings off jiu-jitsu without becoming a world champion, So, like I said, to me, it wasn't that important to step on that podium and grab that medal, because I knew it wasn't that important. I had already done so much of my life before that moment that I was like, it's fine. No big deal.
How do you, I know that being a father is important to you, raising your children and setting an example there. How do you have these conversations with your kids when they're active competitors? They're looking up to have seemingly have careers in this. They have a talented father who's able to show them and kind of explain the path there. When something like this comes up, what's that discussion like with them?
I have a complete open dialogue with my family. Everybody knows exactly everything that's happening in the household. My kids know that I've been, doing my testosterone replacement for years. Explain to them what I'm doing. And I've also explained to them why they are not going to do it until they are of age and they need it. You know what I mean? If you don't need it, why are you going to use it? You know what I mean? And I think that's the thing. There's the jiu-jitsu community is in a thought process right now that there's people who don't need it, who are using it because they want to get an edge. You know what I mean? They need that edge. And that's the edge that they're looking for, and like I said, in my case, it's not it. I left MMA at a much later age. I left MMA, I think I was 35, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to compete in jiu-jitsu because it's kind of starting to move and it's starting to kind of become interesting and fun. And I started doing well with it, you know, and this transition has been great. And I still feel like I'm not quite done in it. I feel like I still have a space to help this sport change. There's so much just sitting on my heart, you know, and sometimes I have these thoughts and I'm like, man, I need to do that. I need to make sure I get that done. I need to make sure I do this. And these thoughts are to, you know, help the sport grow for my children. Exactly. You know, for the question, as you said, what do I explain to them? I explain to them that, you know, that this is a growing sport that they're involved in and that they love. And it still has a lot to change and to grow into, you know, and hopefully with me being in the position that I am and them being these amazing little athletes that I've helped already build, you know, because they know they've seen I've set the examples for them at home, you know. Yep. It's not like I'm telling you what to do, I'm showing you what to do. You know what I mean? And it's different when you're showing somebody. It's much harder to tell someone what to do as opposed to showing them what to do, you know? So that's I think I answered the question, right?
Yeah, no. It's a challenging thing, and it goes back, I think, to like there's in life, no matter what the situation is, man, there's your nucleus of people that are really important that truly know you. And it's got to be hard when you're someone like yourself who has a personality, right? You're a known person in the world of jiu-jitsu, and you have platform, and people can find you online, and they can talk about you, and they can do whatever they want, and you're still a person with a family, and those people know you best, right? And even what's really surprising me, which I always find this very strange, as I'm pretty new in total to like online forums and stuff, right? It's a great place to interact with listeners and audience members and stuff like that. But I'm not someone who's spent my entire life on chat rooms. And what's really interesting about something like proposing a question of saying like, hey, Vagner's going to be on the podcast. Anyone have questions? First, you're hit with a onslaught of just BS troll kind of shit posting talk, right? And then what I've found is if you actually address these people individually to try to understand why they said what they said or what they really mean, they're so surprised that someone is asking them to elaborate that they almost don't know what to do, and they become completely normal instantaneously. So they go from having this huge, nasty opinion, oh, that person, this, that, the other thing, blah, blah, blah. And I go, I'm just trying to better understand what you're saying. Like, can you reference an article? Can you show me something that actually shows a conviction, involvement, whatever? And they can't, like straight up, they can't.
They go facts.
They go, oh, well, you know, someone talked about it over here on this thing. And I'm like, well, did you listen? It's kind of like when someone goes, well, you know, they've been doing studies on those that you shouldn't do this. And you go, can I read this study? And they send you the study, and the study is done on 6 fucking people by no one qualified to do a study. And then people form opinions on that. So it's almost like you can't listen to it because it.
No, and we can even touch the subject that you said earlier, the subject with this guy I know, Marcel. Like, it's exactly this. Like, people want to form an opinion about you, about something they read or something they heard, and they have no real facts, and they make their facts up, and then their facts become the gossip that becomes somebody else's facts, and then that fact becomes something else that's distorted and not the truth at all, not even close to the truth. And that's been my whole career. You know, it's weird. You know, like I'm like, the people who love me know me. They're like, they know who I am. You know, and I have such a huge family base here in Florida, like between students and people across the world that really know who I am. But I still have that little population around the world that just say things that I'm like, bro, that's so not true. Why are you saying that? You know, why are you commenting this that's not true? You know, and this gentleman, this Marcel, right? This allegation.
Yeah. What was your history prior to this incident? We can talk about what the incident was. What was your history with this person?
He was a person, a friend of mine. I'm not going to say a person because I'm going to say the truth. He was a friend of mine from 2007 till, a couple years ago when he disappeared. He is a guy who I spent years training with, guy who spent time inside my home with my children, a guy whose wife was very good friends with my wife, a guy who I had a true, genuine friendship with, a guy who flew with me to events, a guy who flew with me to fights, a guy who, I considered a friend, a person who was dear, to me, I would say, and he committed a huge mistake in his life, a huge mistake. He got involved with a student. He got involved with a 16-year-old girl at his gym, and his gym was not my gym. This is where the stories start to turn, right? People are like, "Oh, he was having relationships with a 10 or 11-year-old girl inside your school." You know how many times I read that, and I'm like, "Bro, what are you saying?" Like, this guy had his own school, a couple hours away from me, not my school, not my student, not my people. Like, one thing had nothing to do with the other. Now, was I friends with the guy? Yes, I was friends with the guy. Did I know the guy? Yes, I knew the guy. Did I know he was having a relationship with a young female at a school? No, I did not. How did I find out? I found out just like everybody else found out when the mugshot came out, and I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to this guy." So it's one of those. You hear the story, and then people want to tag you because, one, you're probably the most famous person involved with this person, meaning the most famous person this person knew, right?
Right.
And that's how I feel like I got drawn into this situation. And during the pandemic, when I was having no students in my school, I was having conversations with this guy, kind of like helping him, jump off the ledge. The guy was in a deep place in his life, a deep situation, like he's being persecuted to go to jail, and things are happening, and his marriage is failing. I'm like, what am I going to do? Push away a person who's already struggling? Like, I'm going to be that person? Like, oh man, me and you are not friends anymore because you made a mistake in your life. No, I'm not that man, and I'm easily admit that to anybody. Like, I'm not going to be that person. I'm gonna talk to the guy, like, hey man, let's put this on order. You know what I mean? Like, let's figure out what's the next step. So I got persecuted for trying to be a friend to a person people thought I shouldn't have been a friend to. And
do you have regrets about not distancing yourself from him in that instance?
If you have family, I imagine, right? If somebody you consider to be family to you made a mistake of that caliber, let's just say, and they were alone in the world, let's just say, would you distance yourself from that person? That's the question I ask anybody who, if you feel that you should have distanced yourself because they made a mistake, then to which his own. But I didn't, and I felt like I needed to be a voice of reason, a person who put real direction and guidance on this man's life, and God. I feel like that was the number one thing I think I did for him, was help him see how important him finding God in his life would be for him. Finding the principles, the true principles of what life is about. Why are you doing these things? Why are these things happening to you? When we think we start to blame everything else and everyone else, we start to really self-identify and find, like, hey man, this is, you made a mistake. You need to own up to it. So yeah, man, I don't see it that way. And like I said, to which his own. If you
Right.
if you were in those shoes, and nobody ever thinks to be put in that position. Like, what if it was me? Well, would I want everybody to push me away?
Yeah,
Maybe
I mean, it's a lesson in. I mean, look, man, this stuff it's hard to talk about because what he did is, I mean, just flat
It's
out
wrong.
unacceptable in every sense of
It's
the word,
wrong.
right?
It's wrong.
And when you think about, if you think about your best friend, we'll say, right? Like if your best friend, you know everyone that you know and love to the best extent that you know and love them. And if something were to happen, it it doesn't make nothing is easy. It doesn't make anything easy. It doesn't make anything harder, but you have to deal with those things in the moment the way that you deal with them. And if consoling that person feels like the right thing to do, and being a guide for them in a moment when they're down, at the end of the day, like that's only you know how you would respond because you went through it. And I don't, you know, like even listening to talk about this, I don't wish that experience on even your most harsh critic. I hope that they never have to have a situation where one of their best friends, people that they love, goes through something like this, because you don't know how you would act until it's in your life. Can you see, is when you think back on that,
it's like having a friend. It's like having a friend that, you know, you hang out with and you have a couple beers, you know, like for example, you and your friends have a couple beers every weekend together. That friend gets behind a wheel, drives his car and gets in an accident and happens to kill someone. Like, does that make the guy a murderer? It does, right? Yeah. Are you going to condemn that person and never look them in the eyes and tell them like, hey man, it's going to be something of this is going to be better for you. Something of this is going to change your life. Something of this is going to make you a better human being, you know? And this is, you know, like I said, his situation, of course, is not the same, but it's one of those that you're just like, man, what do? You can't change what's happened. You know what I mean? Right. You need to own up and you need to, you know, do the right thing. I just don't feel like the people who are surrounded by those people deserve to be condemned for their mistakes, you know, and that's exactly right. For me, being friends with a guy, like, oh, now I'm going to be condemned for it, you know, and I wasn't online like saying, hey, this is my best friend. This guy he's right. He didn't make a mistake. He you know, he had a relation. No, bro, I have a girl at home. My daughter is the same age as the girl that the relationship was happening with. Same age.
What was like,
clearly know it's wrong.
When you found out, you found out the same way that everyone found out, which is the headline. What's the initial contact with someone like that like after you find this out?
It took me a whole year. A whole year. I didn't speak to this man for a year. I didn't have a word with him. Mm-hmm. And that started eating me inside. Like, man, I was friends with this guy. This guy would come to my house. This guy was, you know, travel with me, help me with fighting, like out of his own pocket. You know what it's like to fight. It isn't you're making a bunch of money. Yeah. Like, this guy is somebody I know. Like, for a while, it made me feel some type of way. Like, man, am I doing the right thing? Like, I don't think I'm doing the right thing. I'm not doing the right thing. And the first conversation is always like, hey, how are you doing? You know, like, what else is there to say? You know, like, we're not going to change what's happened. You know, it's what's next. You know, what's happening. You know, where's this going? How are you feeling? How's your family? How's your kids? You know, so another man with a family, you know, and a life, you know, that needs to still go on. You know, and that's what it is. A lot of people never have the ability to have compassion, man. That's the thing. Like, you got to have compassion for others, you know. And I'm not saying I shouldn't have compassion for this man because he did this. No, I do have compassion for him because it's not just him. He's got kids. He's got a wife. His life is completely dismantled, and life goes on. You know, there's
and compassion for her and her family as well.
Yeah, compassion for everything,
trauma that
everything
happened there.
You know, and that's what people don't have. And people are more worried about crucifying others than they are about, does anybody even know the name of the girl?
No, and you know, I'm trying to pull this up right now, but I
The
wanted to,
thread.
yeah, on the topic of crucifixion. I want to read, just kind of like read some of these to you, and if you're okay with it, and see what your thoughts are. So I said, I'll be hosting Vagner Rocha for the recording of episode 83 of the Mayn Idea podcast. Given the recent IBJJF suspension, I figured it'd be an open thread to give anyone questions for people might have for him. I will try my best to include questions during the discussion. I mean, I felt like that would kind of invite, like, yeah, if anyone has questions, like constructive questions about IBJJF suspension, kind of like what we're doing. I kind of thought it would be like this, like maybe people want to learn about what's the mindset, what's going through, what should we talk about, what needs to change in the sport, what kind of regulation should I kind of thought it would be like that. I'll just read these off. Why is he so chill with known rapists, but then he gets so worked up over hypothetical drag queens? You should bring up the actual grooming and sexual assault.
Hypothetical drag queens? What are we talking about?
Not sure what that is. You should bring up actual grooming and sexual assault. It's called being woke and being Me Too'd. Made up problems and drag queens is not. Again, I don't understand the drag queen reference here. I'll just read one more. This is where is it? I guess that was kind of the what is it like being a grown man with the temper of a 7-year-old? FBI, open up, ask him if he also likes kids, ask him if he has any tips on harboring fugitives. What are your, like, when you hear this kind of stuff, what are your thoughts?
It's again what I told you. It like distorted, non-factual facts. It's all things that are just like, what are they even talking about?
What is the drag? I couldn't find any understanding of the drag queen thing. I don't understand that.
I'm like completely confused. Like, this is what I'm telling you. Like, this is I personally don't respond to these people. That
I said,
I don't even know what to say to that.
I said, did you in response to many of, this is me writing to some of these questions. I said, in response to many of the responded questions, I found this article from Flow Grappling, and I had basically you and Cyborg had a comment there. And I said, it's hard to glean from the article what involvement Vagner had with Marcel, other than his wife and kids that train at the gym as a friendship. There's no charges against Vagner nor charges against Cyborg. So what's the purpose of referencing this? In that, meaning in a very short amount of time of a cursory search online, to go and actually try to read like what happened without talking to you yet, to go and look like of the available information, what can you really learn from it? And what I learned in like 10 seconds was that neither of you guys were charged with anything.
Nada.
The person that did do something wrong was charged.
Yep.
And that there was association in the same way that you just described it, which was there was a pre-existing friendship and something happened. So as a host, as someone who loves the sport, I read through that and I was like, I mean, in a way, it was like disheartening to me, because the most liked, the most upvoted, the most shared, the most referenced comments are the most brutal, the ones that have the most aggressive kind of little chatter to them. And then, like I was alluding to earlier, those were some of the same people that when I then engaged with them, backpedaled and had like a somewhat all of a sudden human response to me trying to actually be constructive about this whole thing.
Well, can I know what you asked and actually the ones that responded to you, what they said? Because to me it's just funny.
Yeah. So let's see so this original. Let me find the original. Yeah. So the original statement and the most upvoted. Why is he so chill with known rapists, but then he gets so worked up over hypothetical drag queens? And then let me find where I said.
That is so confusing to me what that even means.
I said, how would you phrase a question to address this if you were actually trying to dig at the root of the type of behavior? I'm not being facetious. I just want to think of a way to bring up questions like this in conversation versus instantly building a defensive and accusatory posture based on what you said. And then they produce, I guess I would ask him if it's taken the time to look at the company he keeps in jiu-jitsu and what kind of impact he wants to have on jiu-jitsu outside of competition. With women bringing and growing presence in the sport, is he hesitant to work with people who have a sordid history? He's expressed concerns about the influence others can have on kids. What sort of action does he take to contribute to the development of children to prepare them for adulthood? That is the same exact person who moments ago said the first thing. Like, that's the problem with online presence, is behind that there's someone who's capable of thinking and actually putting forth something that's like useful, who clearly doesn't have these ideas about you, because if they truly did, if they really thought that about you, they wouldn't be able to form another question that was somewhat constructive, right? But behind the keyboard and the anonymity, feel like they can just call people racist harborers, rapist harbors, which is like, dude, imagine walking up to someone and saying that to them. I would expect to just be stabbed, or like, you know,
if somebody walked up to me and said that to me, I would actually educate them, and I'd be like, what are you talking? Like, give me facts that you're talking about. Like, explain yourself, because it's non-factual stuff. It's just the internet making up what, like this comment, like, what is he talking about? Where, and he didn't even address the whole drag queen. What does the drag queen have?
I couldn't figure it out.
Like, what? It's just craziness. You're just spewing trash out of your mouth. Like, it just doesn't make sense. You know, that's what I'm saying. Like, the internet just gives powers to anybody. Anybody can say whatever they want, and there's no consequence to it. Like, it's not like you're gonna call the police, the internet police, and say, "Hey, this guy is saying this stuff about me. It's not true." Like, you can't even. There's nobody to complain to. There's no repercussion for the things you say, and anybody can write anything, and anybody can say anything they want, because it just gives you that kind of freedom, you know. And it's sad.
I guess whenever I bring things like this up, I always like to try to look at a constructive way out of it. So, like, maybe we can talk about, let's say you're a fan of X, like you're a grappling fan, you're an ADCC fan, you're a UFC fan, you're a Vagner Rocha fan from his time in the UFC and Strikeforce. When you come across a headline like this, as a fan, as an enthusiast, as a hobbyist, as someone who's not a world-class competitor, who's training 2 to 3 times a week, what do you think the right thing to do is when you come across a headline?
Like doing what you said, like putting a question out there and asking somebody to ask a question?
No, more like if so let's say you're a fan and you're online, you're scrolling through Instagram, and you come across a title and it's like, 5 of the biggest stars IBJJF banned for doping. Right? That's what the title says. It just says banned for doping. What do you think is the right thing to do as a fan, if you, in this example, to start to like improve this? Because what's happening is people are reading headlines, they're taking the headline verbatim, they're doing no further investigation. Also, how could they investigate? Where do you go do that? And then on top of that, they don't have proximity to you, so they can't go up to you after training and say, hey.
You can't investigate by using this thing called Google? Like, that thing.
Well, it's a little confusing. That's the problem, is like, you can search on Google, but you do find pretty like misleading things. And there's no here's maybe, I'm kind of answering the question, but do you think it would be better if someone came across this and then they reached out to you personally via DM and said, hey?
I answer all my DMs, and you're right. That would be the best way.
See, something like that's where I think these things start to correct, is like, for people to know that their favorite athletes, people that they care about, they look up to, are willing to talk to you about it.
Yeah, during this incident, I had so many people send me very, very crazy messages. Crazy. Like,
really?
Like, yeah, like, I'm going to shove in your family's mouth. Things like, why are you saying this to me? Like craziness.
Wow.
Like, yeah, like absurd. And there was some far few in between that I answered, that they would say things and I would respond to them and I would correct them and tell them, like, what you're saying is not true, or what you think you read is wrong. and this is the truth, and this is what you think you read. And they would reenact like, oh, I didn't know, oh, I'm sorry, and keep it moving, you know. But it's like you said, it's some of them have actual intelligence in there, and then there's some that don't, you know. There's some in there that sometimes I think we're talking to like 10-year-olds, you know what I mean? Like I'm talking to a child. It's got to be a child on the other end of that, you know what I mean? And you don't know because you don't know, you know.
Such a weird time to such a weird time to be alive, with the way that the internet could just run rampant about anything. I mean, I am not in a position where I'm, you know, everyone in the world knows who I am. Thankfully, I mean, that's got to be a heavy crown to wear. To everything that you do is monitored and commented on and suggested, and people have opinions. And was it when that was all going down, did that change your day to day at all? Like, did you find yourself anything different about the way that like your week was, the way that you would interact with people around your academy? And
no, it saddened me for a little bit, you know. Things makes you sad, you know what I mean? I am very fortunate that I have a very, very strong home life, you know. My wife and my family are amazing, and they have the strength of so many amazing people that love me, that I was getting the proper, you know, counseling and the proper, you know, directions of what I should do and how I should act and what I should say and what I should feel in regards to what people were saying that wasn't true, you know. No, it changed. Like I said, just more of the way I view jiu-jitsu, you know, because like you said, I've given so much of my life to this sport that I see is almost, I like to say ungrateful, but the word ungrateful is wrong, I guess. Just like frugal, you know, like they change so fast, you know. Today, you know, yesterday, no, I'll give you to last week, you know, I'll give you an example. This kid, Galvao, right?
Yeah, 19,
superstar,
pop. PDs, yeah,
superstar of the world, right? And a guy like him is like praised as the next coming of, you know, the next GOAT. You know what I mean? Like, and now an article comes out about him, you know, using a chemical to help balance his testosterone level, which he wasn't using steroids. He was using a chemical to help balance his levels out because his levels were below normal. And I have insight because I know the kid personally, and his levels were below because of the stress he was going through with traveling and competing and doing seminars, you know, and trying to make a living for his family who was struggling. You know what I mean? Kid came from nowhere. And now he is under this scope, and people are talking bad about him and saying this, that, the other. And what they're saying most of the time is facts that they made up, things that they think is true, you know. And behind those facts, there's people reading that, you know. There's other people that are close to this kid, and you know, his family is reading that, and his, you know, he might be reading that. You don't know who's reading those things that those people are saying, and people don't see that. They believe, you know, you just say whatever you want, and who cares, you know. And it's, you know, it's easy to do that when you are a nobody, right? When maybe 100 people in the world might know your name, but when 100,000 people know your name, that things change. You know what I mean? And that makes the pressure different, you know. And those comments, they mean something, you know, and they hurt people, you know. They truly, you have to have some sort of, you know, foundation of who you really are for this to not to affect you, you know. So
what are your thoughts on the whole to be fair, I haven't read enough through to really have an opinion on it, other than I've seen that he was stripped of his belt, and he popped for banned substance. Yeah, I was saying, you know, what are your thoughts on the Micael Galvao situation? Because I haven't read enough to have an opinion, and I don't know enough about the banned substance that he tested positive for. The important question is, why would someone be taking that at that age? I, again, don't know enough about it. So can't form an opinion, but given the demands of the sport, what you know about it, what you know about Mika, his age, his success, his stardom, all this kind of stuff, what responsibilities does he have that he needs to own up to, and what's kind of like your overall view on everything that has happened there?
What is there to own up to, right? Like, he took something that he felt was important for his health, and apparently he didn't understand, was as he says, was educated to take it because it would make it better for his production level of testosterone that was very below normal. Again, he took it uneducatedly without knowing that it would be on a list of things that you can't take, that for a competition he was going to do 6 months later, you know? And knowing the kid personally, I know that it doesn't take away not one single thing of the person he is, and the amount of jiu-jitsu that he has, and the athlete that he is. You know what I mean? Like, the kid is special. You know, he's abnormally good, you know, and he's going to be one of those people that's going to make a change in the sport, him and his family. But, you know, that's, you know, this is one of those platforms, again, that people are going to share their, you know, their opinions on, and they're going to say things. And like I said, I believe the thing he took is something you can get over the counter at GNC. You know what I mean? Like, it's, you know, USADA, there's a lot of rules that certain things you can't do and you can do. You know, you can't do and can do. So
I mean, to that note, though, is there some responsibility to the athlete to be more diligent in understanding what those banned substances are and aren't?
Do you think it's fair that you put all these protocols for one event, and then other events no protocol, and then you have to go do all of this homework to find out what is and what isn't? You know, like you know, clearly taking testosterone isn't legal, right? In this event, for example.
Right.
But when you talk, like, for example, you know what DHEA is?
Yeah, it's a precursor to testosterone production.
You're not allowed to take that.
Right.
Like, it's a vitamin.
So I mean, this is where this is just
it's so many
personal,
things.
like, my personal
responsibility.
Yeah, like, I want to, having been an athlete that used to get tested by USADA, I grew up a competitive skier, and I took a lot of ownership. This is just me personally. I took a lot of ownership on knowing what I could and couldn't ever use, to maybe an over-analyzed approach, because, and I still do maintain this, that to some degree, because the rule sets say that you can't, doing it anyway it's cheating,
Illegal.
in that no one is allowed to, but they are. And so when you do that, it violates the rule. The rule is in place to establish parameters, and when you go beyond that, you're adjusting your leverage on the playing field. That doesn't mean that other people aren't doing it too. It's just on the individual level, going beyond that, you're taking on that risk as an athlete. And
of course,
it gets murky in that, look, when I was a kid and I'd go to my doctor tells me to do something to help me out, because I had blood drawn and I had low testosterone. I'm not a competitive athlete, so I took DHEA, and I considered testosterone replacement therapy, right? As a non-competitive athlete, just a person in the world who's taking recommendations from my doctor. But if I was a competitive professional athlete, and we can talk a little bit about the professional, not because of the things you alluded to earlier, the professional means you're getting paid for it, but in jiu-jitsu, you're really not getting paid for any of it. So it's all risk, no reward. But I do feel disappointed as a fan, when I see someone like Mika, who is so exciting, who is so dominant, who's such a phenom, who, again, I don't think that testosterone makes Micael Galvao as dominant as he is. I think if you took it away from him, I still do actually believe that athletes of that caliber still perform within a percentage of where they are anyway. It's not like he shows up and he's just like not good at jiu-jitsu anymore and everyone steamrolls him, and who was this kid before he found testosterone? I don't think that's the case at all. But it's disappointing as a fan when you see this happen. And it makes me think two things. One, I want the IBJJF to start paying athletes if they expect them to compete at these standards and adhere to these rules, because you're asking an athlete to put themselves through the absolute ringer 7 days a week, sacrifice sleep, social life, travel, all these things to perform in your events and draw eyes and adhere to rules. And then you're not rewarding them. You're not rewarding them for what they're doing. So it has to, on some level, that needs to change there. And I don't know how, because you need funding and capital to be able to reward people, but there needs to be something in place that incentivizes the athlete to think about not violating the rules. And I don't think that there is right now, because if there was incentive, maybe they wouldn't do it as much.
Yeah, it's like I said, they have a great platform. They're an amazing jiu-jitsu tournament, but they are takers, and they've been taking for a long time. I mean, many years. And like I said, they run an amazing tournament, but I honestly don't think they're doing anything to evolve the sport to the next level. And adding USADA to it is a false way to pretend. Look, we're trying to change the sport. Let's not change the sport. Put the sport somewhere on a different platform. Take it to a new level, and make it so that there's real sponsors and real money in the sport. And, pay the athletes a little bit, because they do make a lot of money. They do make a lot of money between all of their tournaments year round, and they don't, they don't, and then they won't change. And they've changed very slowly over the time I've been alive in jiu-jitsu. So I don't see it changing much more than it has already in the next 10 years,
Well, if we can close with some optimism. What is your view for jiu-jitsu in the future here? Like, where do you see this going between the growth of ADCC and the popularity of no-gi jiu-jitsu, gi jiu-jitsu, just the growing sport in general across the world? More people are getting involved every single day. They're finding it through different channels. They're being able to participate in areas where academies didn't exist before. What are your thoughts on where we're headed?
It's grown a lot since let's not go in 10 years. I think it's grown a lot in 5 years. Mm-hmm. I hope it keeps growing in the same amount, because it's significant change that's happened in the last 5 years. But I don't know. I really, truly don't know. I don't know where it's going, because I see patterns that have started and then I've seen them fall apart. And I saw things that I thought were going to be around forever in jiu-jitsu, events that were doing so good. And I saw actual potential for people to, make a living off of. And then I saw them fall apart. Pandemic kind of killed a lot of really cool events as well. Yeah. I don't know. I honestly really don't know. I am.
Will we see you in 2024 ADC? Do you want to go again and do it?
I do. I want to, because I want to do it for my kids too. I want to do it for the future of my school. And I say my kids, I mean my immediate son and daughter. Yep. I really feel like all three of us could be in the next ADCC together. I think my daughter is she's one of the best in the world right now. She's easily in the top 5 of her weight. Easy. I believe she's in the top 3, but she's easily to be in that top 5 of her weight. And my son is 16, and he's a phenom as well. And I believe he'll win the trials, the next one coming around, and we'll be able to make history with 3 athletes. And I don't think there's ever been a father and daughter and son.
Yeah, father, son, daughter. I mean, man, Vagner, that's so rad. Being able to, my dad competes in CrossFit, and we've developed a better relationship as we've gotten older, and being able to do stuff like that with him, I can't speak for your kids, but it's something really special, man. Being able to work out with my dad and do things that are physically demanding, not many people get to do with their fathers, and that'll be something that they remember for the rest of their life, let alone the fact that you're talking the ADCC stage here. I mean, is there a cooler experience for a family to be able to all be athletic and physically ready enough to be standing there together doing that? I think that would be incredible.
Yeah, we this has been kind of our thing. We've all been talking about it, and whether I go to ADCC and win or not, I mean, the goal right now is to get them ready for them to get there and be part, take part, and then for me to hopefully I win, and then if that would put the icing on the cake, and then I can, I don't know if I would even retire just because I would win, but if I honestly I don't see myself retiring before the next one, and knowing me, if my body is anywhere near the way I feel today, I don't see myself retiring for another 10 years. You know what I mean? I feel good. Like I truly feel wiser than I've ever felt. I feel, sharper than I've ever felt. I feel, life is just in it's like sequin, you know what I mean? It's like, it's all flowing perfectly, So I don't see a reason for me to stop. Yeah.
What do you do? Obviously, look, like the TRT and stuff, that's an aspect, and everything that we know about, fitness and recovery, that doesn't do the work for you, and it doesn't make things easier. It helps you recover, right? Which is great, but you still have to do the work. You still have to have the frequency. You still have to have the intensity. You have to have the mindset. It doesn't change your mindset. What things is Vagner Rocha doing outside of the academy to help your body get back in line? Because this is something that I struggle with. I'm like cold plunging, sauna, I stretch every night, and I get wrecked, man. Like I deal with neck shit and wrist shit and elbow shit all the time. Like you said earlier, you're always like some degree of injured. It's just part of it. It's like I love doing it, so I'm going to keep going every day, and I'm going to keep dealing with these things. But at in your 40s, what are you doing to keep yourself there? Because longevity is important, right? I think a lot of people get injured and they quit because they don't know how to deal with it. So what are you doing to stay there?
Every day I'm doing Epsom salt baths and cold baths. I'm like, it's very, very hard for me to miss one of these sessions. Like if I miss it, it's because of something serious, but I'm trying to do them as many times as I can weekly. I need to add more stretching. I feel like I don't do that enough, but I've been disciplined with some stretches that I need. And I train every day. I don't train hard every day, but I do train every day. I'm trying to get 1 to 2 sessions a day of training jiu-jitsu. And I don't mind having bad days. Like a bad day to me doesn't mean anything. A bad day is just another day that I'm on the mat. So it's just a being consistent, long-term goal, being here, being present, and just doing it over and over again till the wheels fall off, And like I said, I don't go in there with every day I need to fight as hard as I can. Some days I go in there and I roll with the littler people. Some days I go in there and I roll with the tougher people. Some days I go in there and I roll with, the middle people. And then it's like a little bit every day, and that's my goal.
It's and really cool seeing.
I rest when I need to rest. I rest.
Like there's someone that they always say rest is a discipline. That's the hardest part when you're an athlete is respecting the not working part, because you get addicted to the grind. You fucking love it. That's why you're elite. That's why you're good at what you're doing. But to respect your body, and you always feel like you're getting worse when you're not pushing forward. But it is so cool to be a fight fan and to be alive at a time where athletes like yourself and like Glover Chihara are winning championships at that point in their life. Like it's just so cool to see. Those are the people that we're getting to look up to, like you guys are still showing that you don't just turn 40 and quit and retire, or like stop playing, or you can't run as fast or whatever. It's this, you're all finding a way instead of finding an excuse. And it's really inspirational.
It is very cool to see, you know, Glover Teixeiras of the world still doing this, and they're doing it because they love it.
Yeah.
You could tell that guy loved every ounce of every minute he's ever spent in the ring. He didn't do
Yep.
it because he wanted to be a champion. He just did it because that's what he knew. It's all he knew how to do. You know.
Yep.
So I'm blessed because I am doing jiu-jitsu not because I see the benefits of doing jiu-jitsu, but because again, back to it just changed my life. It just made
Yeah.
me see things differently. You know, that was the beginning of this whole conversation, is about changing
Yep.
my life, you know, and jiu-jitsu changed my life. And I try to do as much as I can like that for others, you know, just try to help and show better paths, you know, to the future.
Well, Vagner, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to be here. One, thank you for your transparency to be willing to talk about this kind of stuff. I feel like my hope is that people hear conversations like this and it motivates them to just think a little bit differently the next time that they hear anything, right? Not to just become questioning every single thing you hear, but like, hey, when you're about to form an opinion, form it out of rationality and out of thought, not out of emotion and out of the fact that someone else has that opinion too. And it's your willingness to have these conversations that I think people will hear that in a different light, you know, and hear someone who's not ignorant to the voices that are out there, and you know, you're thinking about this stuff. So I really appreciate it. Love to do this again in the future. You'll always have a spot on the show. So thank you, man.
I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure being here, and yeah, like you said, man, I this should be like a lesson for many people. You know, like there's anybody can have an opinion about things that they think they know. You know, and honestly, there's so many things we think we know that we don't really know. You know, and you know, especially when it comes to someone or about someone's life or about somebody, you should think twice about saying something, you know, because, you know, sometimes it's unnecessary, you know, and it's not true. So,
well, I appreciate it, brother. Thank you.
thank you.